like sucking, but I ain't gay.
Legit bad podcast.
Fuck those honkies.
Big ass.
Welcome to Costco. I love you.
He really knows how to suck a wiener.
Welcome back to Legit Bat. I'm Joe. Jen's here. Ben could not make it tonight, of course, but you know, we all understand. And tonight it actually wasn't his bedtime. He just had to go to his kid's performance, so we'll give him this one. He can sit it out. But today's episode is brought to you by us. You're welcome. Oh, and also brought to you by all the listeners. So I never plug our sponsor enough, so I figured I would this time. But tonight we have Mr. Steven. I won't say your last name in case you're weird about that, but from the BG cast. And introduce yourself. And I know you probably heard this a ton, but what does BG stand for?
So, you know, it's kind of funny. Back 3 years ago, when I first started this podcast, I am an avid health and fitness enthusiast. I like to, go to the gym and stuff and hike and stuff here in Colorado. And I had another buddy of mine who would live with me who, he was into a lot of the same stuff I was. He was into the Great Awakening. And so it originally meant Berserker Gang, because, we were both lifters, but we were into the Awakening. And then, after for a little bit, I had to put the podcast down for a couple of years. Just life things came into, into the picture. And so about, let's fast forward back to last October. I've been following Ben Davidson on YouTube for a long time, and he was having a meet and greet down in Colorado Springs. So me and my wife went down there, and we went to go meet him. Him and I kind of hit it off, and I was talking with him about him trying to get on Joe Rogan's podcast, and I half joked. I was like, I used to have a podcast. I think I was I thought about revamping it, and he was like, I'll get on it, and I was like, really? I was like, okay. So then kind of the wheels started turning again. And, so I just decided to shorten it to BG. So as of right now, it really doesn't have a meaning, to be 100% honest, but I feel the retitlement of it was more appropriate for the message I'm trying to relay, at least at this point in time.
Yeah, but, unique. Yeah. I've never heard of another one called that. So perfect. Nobody's ever heard of a legit bat either. Well, till now.
And it has a good background story. It's all that matters.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about the origin stories. So I know you have a couple of topics you want to get into tonight. So where do you want to start it off? What's been rattling around in your noggin?
Well, honestly, what's really been rattling around in my noggin is, to me, I don't know if you've had a chance to check out some of the stuff I talk about, but just looking at a lot of things going on in the world today, in the collective consciousness, the world stage and things like that. I think it's becoming a little bit more and more apparent that this has been a topic of conversation lately with a lot of people. It's becoming a little bit more and more apparent that, we're dealing with some kind of theater. We're dealing with, some kind of, stage, and what we're dealing with as actors, So I come from the premise that what we're kind of going through is a perfectly staged Great Awakening. And the reason why I feel this is because if you look at the world before 2012, right, everything was still going on. Don't get me wrong. There were still a lot of things still occurring. The New World Order plan was, still being put forth, and the gears were turning. But after 2012, I've kind of used this phrase that we got the Awakening expansion pack downloaded onto our reality. And
DLC.
Yeah, yep. Is a DLC. It's it's got all these different characters. I mean, you can see all the characters, so And basically, where I come from is you kind of see how after 2012, yes, that was the end of the 13th Baktun for the Mayan long count calendar. A lot of people back then thought it was going to be the end of the world. I think it was just really the official start of the new world was then. And then you kind of see after 2012, what I kind of call the obscurity and insanity crescendo. It just kind of started shooting up and up and up and up. And now we kind of are in this predicament that we're in today. So where I base this from is actually it's really deeply rooted in a lot of spiritual and philosophical principles. So I feel, when you take something and you make it seem very overtly taboo, all right, or a huge no-no without any logical reason or any rational explanation, what's that do to the human being? You raise your eyebrows. You're like, why is he so really gung-ho about me not looking at this? Why is he really so gung-ho about this, and this? And then you kind of look at what the world governments have done to, spirituality, religion, God. They've made that seem so overtly taboo. It does not exist. We cannot prove it exists. I mean, look at what they do to people like me and everybody else. They make us seem like we're so absolutely crazy, that we're just completely like lunatics and that we're not making any sense.
Well, at the same time, there's a certain spirituality kind of being pushed too, and I've heard a lot of people talk about that with the New Age thing. So, what's that about? If it's supposed to be a taboo thing.
So the New Age movement, what's kind of funny is, I don't really knack on them. It's what they've done. I call myself old age, right? And it's kind of funny when I say that because, yes, I mean, if you had to label me, I'd be a Hermetic Gnostic Taoist, I guess, if you had to label me. But a lot of the philosophies and spiritual traditions that I partake in and that I practice date back for thousands upon thousands of years, and they've adopted some of those traditions. Most certainly they have, and they've adopted some of those viewpoints. But where I think that they've kind of lost touch a little bit in some ways is they really spiritually peacock is what I kind of call it. You know what I mean? In a lot of ways, they spiritually peacock. Like every time I've and this is an objective observation based on what I've seen. I'm not saying everybody's like this, but, a lot of the people who participate in the New Age movement that I've seen with or spoken with, they're all about like putting their spiritual powers and prowess on a pedestal. Like
put it on Instagram.
Exactly. Right. And then you have the having definitive answers for things you could possibly not have definitive answers for. Right. And that's like something that I've noticed a lot too. And I mean, that's actually quite a bit of it in kind of all spiritualities, honestly, but I've noticed it a lot more in there. So I think it's a great start. If I really want to, get down to what I truly think, I really think it's a great start. I really would like to see them kind of look at the spiritual principles that they've taken from the old age traditions a little bit more and kind of like focus on them in detail, because I think there's a lot of important things there. Like, I mean, playing non-attachment with the ego, dropping duality, things like that I think that they could personally benefit from, but it's better than nothing. It's, I guess, the best way, I can kind of put it right now. I have that kind of positive outlook on it.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything for most of it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just it's kind of the way they go about it. I guess it seems weird because you don't hear a monk in Tibet ever going on Instagram being like, "Oh, morning meditation, everything's beautiful."
I was just gonna say that. So the monks are like the ultimate spiritual beings, or people, but the people in that spiritual community are still learning. They still have so much to learn, but they preach that they have the answers and that they can teach you to do the same things. And it's like, come on, like if you're not really enlightened, or you'd be sitting on a mountaintop in the lotus position or whatever.
And you wouldn't know what an iPhone is.
Right. You wouldn't have an Instagram account at all.
And the one thing I say about that too is, and this is one thing that it irks me a little bit, and I can understand, if this is all you're doing, and this is how you make your living, I completely understand that at that point. But a lot of them, they charge these enormous amounts of money for like these classes. Yeah, these classes that, if you just did a little bit of research and put a little bit of practice into it, you can learn how to do this stuff for free.
Yeah, and I get those ones kind of because there's people out there that learn better with a one-on-one teacher, and if it's worth it to them, fine. But I mean, like you're saying, pretending like you have the answer to all these mysteries or something. That's one of the core things in our show. Is anybody who says that is automatically like, look these people twice, because I don't trust anybody who says they know or they have the answer, because none of us do.
And those places that they have are like spiritual rehab. So you could quit alcohol on your own, but some people have to force themselves to go into that place, pay money and stay there, and then they actually learn their lesson. So I can see a use in that way.
I would have to agree with the both of you. I do not. I just think the only thing that I have a problem with is sometimes what they charge. But no, I agree. As somebody who's been sober off alcohol for 3 years, it was definitely, I had to force myself a little bit for sure. So I can definitely resonate with that. And as far as somebody coming on and saying they have the definitive answers and things like that, if there's one thing I've learned on the 15 years I've been on my spiritual path, is the more I know, the less I know. I don't know a damn thing. It's like every time I've even spoken about how I've been back to the spiritual drawing board about 100 times within this past year, because
At least you're saying that, though, because the kind of people we're talking about, they've always known, and it's just they're there, and there's no going back, and they have all the that's one thing. But admitting that you've gone back to the drawing board 100 times, everybody has, whether you admit it or not. Yeah.
It's a part of life, man. It's being able to really admit that you are a human being, and that in this existence you are not meant to have all of the answers. That would, at least in my opinion, defeat the purpose of being here.
It'd make it pretty boring.
Yeah,
it'd be like playing Zelda for like 5 minutes and having it down. You'd be like, this game was not worth $65. This sucks. Give me more game.
Dude, that's almost like the equivalent. It's like, if you just use the cheat code to unlock everything at the beginning of the game, just so you could
God mode.
Or what was it? I forgot, but was it the old Sonic the Hedgehog? It was up, down, left, right, hold A and press start, and then it unlocked everything or whatever it was. So
I used to have so many of those cheat codes memorized, and I would think about it even then. I'm like, wouldn't that be cool if there's a cheat code to like skip through the day today? Like, I really don't want to do this. Just down, X, Y, left, right. All right, boom. Hey, it's evening time. That would be great.
That would be pretty good. I mean, what's interesting is one thing I've learned is there is a way to actually alter and enhance your perception of time. And it does. It's very interesting. I guess a really good way to put it is you definitely should have a meditation practice. And if you can somehow manage, now it's tough for a lot of people, and I still, I'm still working on it. I'm a work in progress. So, if you can maintain yourself in that present moment focus for most of the day, time does affect you differently. It does. You perceive it a lot differently. And
not just a standard going faster or slower.
Yeah, so I mean, it's really, I think really what happens is your perspective on the time shifts itself. So, and then you're as opposed to, because I know I get it all the time, I'm like looking at my clock, I'm like, man, dude, like, I got to do this and this, and or this is taking so long. But I've noticed that with what I've been doing, at least it helps me kind of, I guess, appreciate the time. That's the best way I can describe it. You know what I mean? It's like it helps you shift your perspective of time, and then within doing that, time itself kind of shifts in your perspective as well. I guess like that's the best way to describe it. I've been doing a lot
of people say that with even exercise and working out, that you can get into such a zone that nothing else is important during the day. It's almost a meditation in itself to work out. Because I think it was Rogan that said, if that's the hardest thing you did that day, everything else is going to be easier, because everything else is totally minor compared to that 300 pounds you're deadlifting,
Well, I would have to agree most certainly that exercise is one way to do it for sure. It definitely does give you a different perspective on the day. I'm a big believer that physical health is part of the Great Awakening. I think, really where a lot of this stuff ties in. If you look at the foods and everything, I remember back in 2008 when I first embarked on this journey, I was really getting serious into my health and fitness. And one question I always asked was like, man, why is all the food that's really good for you supposed to be really health for you, hella expensive. And then all of the food that's really bad for you that you shouldn't be eating is hella cheap. This is kind of like, doesn't make sense to me. You know what I mean? And then after doing a little bit of research, I found out about, the whole aspartame incident. I found out about the lie about, fat being the enemy and it being actually refined sugars. I found out all about the government had involved in it with, Codex Alimentarius back in 2008. What that was is the USDA set a code of guidelines for organic farmers that if they did not want to abide by the USDA guidelines and how they treated their livestock or their crops, they would have to pay a fine, which is actually why organic food prices shot through the roof and started to become hella expensive after 2008, was because of Codex Alimentarius. And
I'm sure Monsanto was behind that 100%, right?
I would have to agree with that, because I mean, and that was the whole thing back in my young days when I first embarked. I did the March Against Monsanto. I was part of the Million Mask March. I did all of that kind of stuff too. And Monsanto most certainly had a hand in it, in my opinion. I mean, I joked about it last night. When you have the own corporation do its investigation on itself, you know what I mean, and do its own scientific studies on its product without a third party, that's the equivalent of Ted Bundy being the prosecutor and the defense attorney at his trial. So, it's what it is. So,
well, how much of this? So I did want to get to this kind of how much of the Great Awakening is more of a revelation of method? I mean, you talked about a little bit before the show about, controlled opposition and all that. And I'm not one to go calling everybody controlled opposition. And that's a different story that's going on right now. But what do you think about that? Like, is this more manufactured awakening? Because it seems to be getting on such a broad scale now. Things that, we've been talking about some people have been talking about for decades. How is that working now in, hand in hand with controlled opposition?
Well, so the people that I think are controlled opposition, I would say, are the people who still feel, I guess you could say, that the best way I can describe it is this: they point people towards small picture issues. They kind of divert people's attention away from the bigger picture at hand. That's one thing that I do feel like when you have people, especially in our community, the one thing that I see a lot of is people really arguing over the minute discrepancies that we have in belief and things like that. And when really, in all honesty, we all want the same thing for the most part. Yes, we might have minor discrepancies in philosophical ideals or, lifestyle ideals or things like that, but we all essentially want the same thing. So one thing I've noticed is, people who kind of divert people back into that mentality, as opposed to like focusing on like a unification of like people on our side of the field. I mean, at least that's how I feel.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, also too, I am, I'm a little bit of an anarchist. I do not think this two-party system is salvageable. This could be my own subjective bias. I don't know. I would happily admit it is.
I always say most people are more like that. The gradient is a lot broader in the middle than they'd have you believe. I think most people think that. Done with the two-party thing. Leave me the fuck alone. Let's all get along. Most people, I think, are like that. But yeah.
No, there is. We call it politically homeless. There's a couple of people I talk with about it too. I've done a couple of Twitter spaces on it, and I think what I think is this, Joe. Since I kind of woke up back in 2008, I've seen the awakening kind of manifest itself in very interesting ways. Actually some least expected ways, but the one thing that I do think in some ways kind of started to get manufactured was kind of after 2020. So I don't know if you guys were paying attention to some of the stuff going on back in 2018 and 2019. There was a big movement in France and in Europe called the Yellow Vest movement. It was like a proletarian revolution. They were doing mass protests. There was a lot of uprisings going on all over Europe, wherever the Yellow Vest movement got, started to do their protests. There was a lot of other different kind of uprisings starting to occur all over the world as well. There's a lot of
Hong Kong, right? Wasn't there a lot in Hong Kong? And
Yes, Hong Kong.
Yeah.
I think Taiwan too actually had some before all of this stuff was going on as well.
COVID shut that shit down quick.
That's what a lot of people theorize, that's another reason they decided to pull the COVID-19 card, was that they wanted to stifle that. They know what's going on. They're aware that there is a I guess you could say an awakening of consciousness kind of going on in the collective here on this planet. And that's where I think the manufacturing started to take place. Was they were like, well, if we can't beat it, you know what I mean, and we can't stop it, we can maybe just try to hop in there and divert it off course. You know what I mean? And that's how, I mean, I think, you know, I'm maybe not the only one who feels that way. I know there's others that feel that way too. And no, I mean, you know, I most certainly do not believe everybody is controlled opposition. I think there's a lot of really good-hearted people out there who are trying to spread the truth, and they're doing their best doing their own version of it. And, you know, and that's kind of like, you know, what we all do. So, I mean, I can't really knock on that at all. And, you know, but there's certain people I'm suspicious of, just because of what they do. You know, how they kind of divert people into more division, as opposed to like, hey, you know, we all kind of want the same thing, right? Like, you know, we all want freedom, and we all want like everything to be, you know, in good hands for community, family, all that. I mean, you know, why don't we stop talking about the fact that, you know, I'm a hermeticist and you're a Christian. Why don't we just focus on like, you know, like the common ground that we have, that we both are done with this. So, you know, and I think those are the ones who I think might, you know, be in on it. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah. I wonder how many of those yellow vests and other protesters in 2019 turned around 2 months later and put a mask on for 3 years. You know what I mean? Because that's how good that plan was. If it was to shut down things like that, it was to pick the weed from the chaff. The wheat, whatever you grow, it's fine. So, but, it's an easy way to split people apart even further. Because
are you saying that because I'm in Colorado? No, I'm just kidding.
We're in California.
I know, right? I know.
We don't have any volunteer plants this year, but yeah, have you ever thought about that? Like how many people turned back to kissing the government's ass after that would have before that been in those protests? You know what I mean?
So this is the one thing I noticed, and I talk about this a lot. There was when COVID came around, there was a massive divide in the spiritual community, dude. It like literally, it like drove a wedge between all of us. We were a pretty unified group before then. Like, you know, we all were about, you know, we all had the same common vision and cause in mind. And when COVID came along, it split a wedge between us all. So, and I do agree with you. It was separating the wheat from the chaff. Most certainly it was. And I feel that you had people like me and, you know, people like us who, you know, we understand freedom is a very spiritual thing. Like, you know what I mean? And having bodily autonomy is a very spiritual thing. And, you know, I'm all about making my fellow human feel good and feel safe. I'm all about that. At the same time, I know psychologically what it does to the human being when you cater to irrational and neurotic fear. When you cater to that and you build off of that in somebody's psyche and in somebody's mind, you kind of cause a psychosis and a mental breakdown. And then you look at, I had a client, I mean, I'm not going to talk about it, but, you know, we're in 2023 right now. We have revised guidelines and everything. He called my office 5 times to make sure I was bringing an N95 mask, exact kind of mask. I showed up to his house. He stood 10 feet away from me the whole time while I was giving him the estimate. You know, this is what it's done to people. Like, you know what I mean? Even after they're telling you, like, even your mainstream sources telling you that, you know, hey, it's okay, you don't have to do this anymore, because of the fear and the you know, terror they placed upon people. This is what it's done. But then you had the other half of the spiritual community, who, you know, kind of fell in with the narrative, like, you know, and I think really, you know, what it was, I mean, I can get it wrong, you know, people have loved ones, things like that. I think really what it was though too is that some of those people were just in the movement because it was the cool thing to do, like, you know what I mean, or they felt
there's always a percentage of those people.
Oh yeah, most certainly. And I feel you know, that it's very possible that yes, like, although like before 2020 we were all very unified in our cause and what we wanted, 2020 was like the test run number 3 for like, this whole situation. And they were like, yeah, let's see what they do now. And yeah. So, and I mean, it really made me sad, to be 100% honest, because I looked at like a lot of friends I had just, just not talking to each other anymore because yeah.
Well, that was also coinciding with Trump being president, and that was the first split of the country. I feel like the second half was the COVID, and now who knows? I don't even know anymore. I can't even keep up with it. I know. I can't. I just can't do it anymore. I did want to talk a little bit because you mentioned NPCs, and this kind of leads right into that. And I know we've been talking about it a lot, listeners. Don't hate on it. It's interesting, and I brought it up again in my head today because Ben had sent me this picture of a Doritos nacho cheese flavored meat snacks. I'm like, what? Creativity is just dead now, and that kind of goes into the NPC thing where I was also reading an article, not to get too long-winded on it, but about minimalism versus classic architecture. Everything's getting brought down to its base level, and there's no freedom of like creativity in this stuff anymore. It all looks the same. Everything looks the same. Houses all look the same. You have Doritos flavored fucking Slim Jims because they can't think of anything new to do with it. Everything just seems recycled and manufactured now. But anyway, with all that said, what were you thinking about with NPCs?
So, you want to know what's funny about so I don't know if you heard you guys read the article, or I think it was a video, but they talked about how some people don't have internal dialogue. Right. Yeah. And they admitted that some people don't have. I have tons of internal dialogue, and I'm like,
it never stops.
Yeah,
not even
same.
at night.
I feel like a crazy person sometimes.
I know, right? That's why I meditate, honestly, because it stills the internal dialogue. It like shuts it down for a minute, and it's like, all right, cool. You know what I mean? And but that was a very interesting article, because I was like, that is, that kind of like that definitely kind of reinforced some opinions of mine. NPCs. So I use a nicer term. I call it backdrop people. I kind of steal it from I stole it from Dolores Cannon a little bit.
Maybe
I think
we
it's a
should
nicer
just start
term.
calling them call them extras. Like the people they pay $10 to be in the back scene of a movie. Yeah, extras. There we go. Not NPCs.
Yeah, but I mean, well, that kind of actually, so that even kind of plays into something that I've kind of, this is a theory of mine. I don't know if I 100% believe it yet, because I'm on the fence if it's a cynical theory or it's I do think in all actuality there's only really truly 1 billion actual humans on this planet, not 7, but 1 billion, and the others would make up who I would call descendants of Cain. Now, whether they are not, really true human or not, that's up for debate. And the reason why I call it that is just because there's a different batch of people on this planet that, I guess you could say have different moral compasses than, the typical human.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't think that's even arguable.
Exactly. And then this is based on my own experiences I've had and the things that I've seen. There are a percentage of humans walking around that are not human, but things posing as human, observing. And then you have what I call the backdrop people, or the extras. And they're just what I would call conscious manifestations of the simulated reality. And because
it's like Free Guy, where he has an actual life and he goes to Starbucks every day and does all that stuff and can carry on a conversation, but he has no fucking idea.
Yes, no, it is. It's very, and there's just, there's certain people that I feel like I've encountered that could have possibly been this. I mean, I feel like if, you can kind of tell, you can look at them, they just feel like they're kind of like devoid of personality. Like they're almost like devoid of personality, or devoid of like any depth or emotion or anything like that. I mean, I'm not, like I said, I don't know definitively, but based on encounters and things that I've experienced that,
I worked with a lot of people like that. We used to call them cardboard because they were just nothing. There's nothing going on back there. They can talk and speak and do their job, but otherwise it's just styrofoam. It's nothing.
I'm telling you, there's some people, man, like, and it's like, I've taken a more positive approach on it. Like, I actually, when I first started my journey many years ago, I was a little zealous nut job, but you grow up and you start to get a basis. I was 21, I was still,
that's prime time for being a nut job. That's great.
It is.
You're
It is.
excused. You
You
are
have your
excused for that.
energy and youth, all of that energy to burn in the world.
I'm
Thank
gonna
you,
make a change. Yeah.
thank you for the excuse, man. I appreciate that. But no, you grow up and you kind of, so I look at them as like, maybe they will. I hope they awaken. I hope they figure it out, and I really hope eventually everybody does. I don't really tell people. I'm not really that person. Oh, these people aren't awakening, or they're not ascending, or there's my true hope is everybody does. I don't have anything against any particular group of people. I really hope you eventually, come to see that there's more to this than we know. And really that's straight up. And I try to take that approach with that, because that's where like, the positive part of me kicks in. It's like, all right, Steve, look, you have to treat them like real people, even if they're not. Okay. It's like, that's the test. Okay. I talk about that with my co-host Joe. Somebody corrected me on it. It wasn't Star Trek Next Gen. I got to remember the show, but basically they were about to like become a space-faring civilization. And they're like, well, we got to put you through this test drive first. We got to put you through this simulation to see if you're going to act on your human ego and your egoic instincts, or you're going to actually be a decent person before we actually let you out to do this. And I do think that's kind of what's going on with us right now, too, a little bit, is that's what that whole, the DLC pack in 2012 for, Trump was on that DLC pack. I think everybody else was, too. But, but that's what I think happened. It was like, all right, we got to test them out now. We got to see if they're ready for this before we kind of move to the next step. So
Yeah, we're in beta. Basically, we're just in beta testing.
we're in the
They're
beta
just working
test.
kinks out. Yeah.
They-
I mean,
they,
there's still a lot of kinks, though. I don't think version whatever is working out very well for a lot of people. Get on it, God coder or whatever you are. So, how do you think that comes to be, though? Because we've talked a lot about NPCs and other things like that in cardboard people. How does that come to be? Are they God's children too? Are they God's creation, or is that something else? Because you talked about several different factions, like people that look like humans that might not be, or maybe a different race of humans, but then there's the extras. So how do any of those creatures come to be?
And you insinuated that some of them could wake up. So I want to hear what you think about that.
So really, the philosophy and the train of thought I come from is that everything's consciousness, right? Consciousness is a prime fundamental of reality. And I mean, physics is starting to head there. They're starting to figure that out now. What's really cool is if you guys get time, check out the implicate explicate model. And it's actually a unified field theory in physics with consciousness. So physics is moving this direction, which makes me really happy. But with that being said, if reality is strictly consciousness, and that's a prime fundamental of reality, then yes, they are children of God, because they might not be, as whole as we might be. This is me speculating. I mean, obviously, but they might not be as whole as they might be, as if they were one of us. But in essence, since everything is essentially consciousness, then yes, it does come from the divine source. It does come from source consciousness. Its purpose, obviously it is, maybe its purpose is to help shift us and nudge us in certain directions by showing us what we don't want to be, or the reality that we don't want. You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of what we're being showcased right now. Very much so. And as far as the people who walk around that look human that are not, I had an experience that where I feel like that I kind of broke through the veil, and I was kind of looking outside of it, and there was like cities and everything everywhere, and I was like, holy crap, dude, this is interesting. And I was like, and then there was humans just like us out there, and I was like, oh my God. And they were like, oh yeah, you're one of us, you just decided to go down there and do that. And I was like, okay, cool. And then like I turned around and looked, and I guess the best way I could describe is the way I saw it is like our reality was this globe, almost like this white globe. And like you could see our reality on it, like through the white globe. And there were these beings, and they had like their head stuck in the globe, but their body was on the outside. And they had like their cohorts around them, and they were all like looking at them. And then they occasionally, the one in our reality would pop its head out, like communicate with its, colleagues or his cohorts and things like that, and then pop its head back in. And then I remember I made that really big recollection right then and there that I was like, that's a little interesting. that doesn't necessarily seem like a human being, but it's posing as one over there. That's pretty odd. So
How did you get into this situation?
I was gonna say,
again?
is this
How
a
did this all
DMT?
start? Yeah,
yes, it was a
or
DMT.
acid.
It was a
Okay.
DMT
Nice.
experience. So I'm a huge believer that that DMT actually removes the blinders of the brain. And there was actually a scientist, these two neuroscientists on this podcast. They were talking about how DMT works with serotonin to modulate how you perceive your visual reality. And so that made me ask the question. I was like, if you increase those levels beyond baseline, are you perceiving more of reality? And I wholeheartedly believe so, especially because one, it's released like 45 days before we're born, while we dream at night, 6 seconds after we die. That's pretty hella significant, in my opinion, for something to be released 6 seconds after you die. Like that definitely means something,
Why is this not being funded?
Well, because it's people, even when I say that and I provide all the evidence, some people are like, well, and I'm like, dude, I was like, but I think they're actually mapping the DMT realm. In fact, actually, I was reading an article on it the other day. I forgot which college is doing it, but they're looking for volunteers. And what they're going to do is they're going to put you in an IV drip in it and let you go in there for like 4 hours. I was like, where's this application? I was like, where's this application? So yeah, they're funding it slowly and the psychedelic revolution started out here too. I mean, now that it's legalized out here in Colorado, people are doing more scientific studies on it. You got CSU doing studies on it. You got University of Boulder doing studies on it. So I hope eventually that comes out. But yeah, it was a dimethyltryptamine experience, and kind of what happened to me last June, that kind of like was the experience that made me go to the spiritual drawing board 100 times over the year. It was so I DMT is like a sacrament to me. I believe it's a sacred thing. I don't think it's something you party with or you do anything like that. Like, it is a deep I call it deep spiritual exploration technology is what I call it.
I agree. I think we just talked about that, where I was like, no, I'm going to not fast, or I'm going to fast and not smoke or drink, or like, if I actually go to do this, I'm just going to be it's going to be like communion on Sunday. Very, very serious.
Every day.
Yeah, it is. And, it was June 6th. And I was feeling pretty good in my heart and my mind. So I was like, all right, let's do it. And I did it. And then when the breakthrough started coming on, I noticed that this is way different than it had ever been before. This was way more intense, way more jaw-dropping, way more astonishing than it has ever been before. And then really the best way to describe it was reality decompartmentalized around me completely. And then there were these 7 8-foot tall human-looking entities. And they had like these serpentine bands of energy coming off of them. And I remember looking up in like pure astonishment, and I'm like, whoa, dude. And then all of a sudden, like, I felt like this water dropping on me. And I was like, where's this water coming from? Because I'm in my basement right here. Yeah, this is my meditation room, my gym, and all that too. But there's no water pipes or anything above me in the ceiling here. So I was like, and then all of a sudden when I thought that, I heard this, the best way to describe it, telepathy is a really short word. I heard it in my chest. And when I heard it, I felt the emotion that was also conveyed with the message that I felt in my chest. And that's kind of like, it's the best way I can describe it, honestly. And they go, the water is a medium between dimensions. This is how we could come to you and we could contact you at this time. And I remember at that point, I was like, holy shit, dude, I did too much. I was like, oh my God. And
did you check shorts afterwards?
Did you have someone watching over you? Was there someone right next to you?
No, it was me alone in my basement. It sucks, dude. Yeah. No,
God.
Brave man.
My wife doesn't like the smell of it. She doesn't like the smell of DMT. So she definitely but and then they were like, we want you to come with us. And I was like, all right, cool. Sure, why not? I'm already in this all the way. Let's go. So they took me to this place they referred to as the true Garden of Eden. And it was like this crystalline city with these geometrically perfect buildings and these like flowing green pastures of grass and like beautiful.
Like Atlantis.
Dude, it was such a beautiful place, man. You could feel the love of the universal consciousness permeating this place, like so heavily. Like it was like you were in complete bliss the whole time. You were just like that. And in the city, they had like humans from all over the universe. Like I was watching them, and like some looked a little different than others. Like some looked different than us. Like there was one I remember that was like taller, had like a weirder jawline, but like still very much like very similar to us. And that's when it like sat down in my mind. I'm like, man, we must be a universal species. There's no other way to explain this than that humans probably exist everywhere in some shape or form. And then you know, we had a conversation, me and them, and then after we had this conversation, it was a very special moment for me. It kind of helped like make me remember and rediscover a lot of things about myself. And then they took me, before I ended up leaving or having to come back here, they took me and they showed me how fabricated this reality is. And that was the thing that blew me away, because I always knew it was, and like, you know, I always believed it was, but then when I actually saw it in this experience and saw how much it was fabricated, that's what blew me away. I was like, whoa, okay, I knew it was this, but not at this kind of level. And then that's when, like, you know, I came back and then I was like, yeah, I got the phone call. That was a good phone call. That was the phone call. And I was like, you know, so, and I actually took a hiatus from psychedelics all the way up until recently. You know, and that was because of that experience.
Yeah, I mean, that, like I said, did you check your drawers afterwards? Because did you have more of, I don't even know how to, did you feel like yourself when you were there though? Or was your whole like persona on Earth just gone and you were something else?
Well, this is where I had this experience, and I have a feeling in the future we're gonna find out that this is true. This is just my opinion though, and I use this term: the human is the extraterrestrial, and the extraterrestrial is the human. And I use that term because yes, I was myself while I was over there, but I was what I would call it was a higher dimensional me. And this higher dimensional me was it almost felt extraterrestrial, to be 100% honest. Like while I was experiencing it, like it felt natural. Like it didn't feel weird or anything like that, or off-putting. It felt very natural, but it felt like something that was so out of this world. I mean, that's kind of the best way to describe it. And that's kind of where I kind of like maybe thought, like, you know, maybe the gods weren't necessarily gods. Maybe they were humans from other places. You know what I mean? And then that's how we all came to be, was that the human form was carried on throughout this lineage or whatever it is. And that's how, you know, we come here and we learn and things like that. And we come here to experience. And I do believe that, as well, that if you want to come here and you want to participate and help in the Great Awakening, you have to hop in a human suit. It's not like in the golden age of Atlantis where things could come and go as they please. You know what I mean? If you want to come here now, you have to hop in the human suit. You can't come like that. You know what I mean? Because we got to keep the act on. You know what I mean? So like that's kind of how I feel, at least.
So what do you think about cryptids and shit like that? Would that fall under the, I guess there's no other category besides cryptids for that, but
just for fun, like, is it just like a little game to throw something out there to get us distracted?
No, well, you know, this is my one thing that I've always felt, that I think it's silly and naive to claim things do not exist if we have no definitive evidence they don't exist. I'm a huge believer that a lot of things could possibly exist until proven otherwise. I mean, you look at, we've only really discovered 64% of the wilderness. That leaves a very large chunk of undiscovered, you know, uncharted wilderness. We only know
not 4%. To mention the ocean.
Yeah, 4% of the ocean we only know. You know what I mean? Like that's what I'm saying. Like there could be things that, you know, exist that we don't even know. And here's the thing: if they've existed long enough here, they're smart and privy to us, and they can stay away from us. It's not hard. Like, you know what I mean? People think it's like completely, if I haven't seen it, it doesn't exist. I'm like, well, there could be a lot of things that exist if you haven't seen them. And I mean, there was a video that this guy I saw, actually, it was on a dive camera, and it was really, really deep in the ocean, and they were looking at this fish, and this fish got speared by something. And then they were like, what the hell? And then this thing shot by super fast, the camera, and collected the fish and went the other way. You know what I mean? And I was actually watching it, and then the guy was trying to debunk it, and he's like, I can't necessarily debunk this. This looks to be like a apparent legitimate video, like not edited, things like that. So I think, that they've even caught, what is it, the Ningen cryptid. They've caught it on dive cams before. I think there was
What
like
does that look like?
I don't know what that one
so
is.
the Ningen, the Ningen it's like a humanoid looking whale. Like if you look at it has a head and like shoulder girdle and like almost arm-like fins.
That is
right?
creepy. Fuck.
Dude, I'm telling you, right? Like I'm telling you, they've caught it on dive, like 2 photos on like dive cameras of it. They've caught it. So that it exists. It's just not seen very frequently.
Yeah, it's the same with Bigfoot, and I've always said a million times, I don't really give a fuck about Bigfoot, but it would be interesting if they found one for sure. But a lot of times the evidence, quote, evidence against some of these things existing is no evidence. So they're using the fact there's no evidence as evidence that it doesn't exist. And is that what you're kind of getting at?
So I think really what we do, especially in the scientific community in this country a lot, is we tend to use Occam's razor a little too heavily, right? And what I mean by that is it's like it's the easiest available answer with the most readily available evidence. But that's the thing too, is anecdotal evidence is a very real thing also, and I think it gets disregarded a lot. A good example that I call anecdotal evidence is, I don't know if you guys have heard of the Fatima incident. It happened in Portugal in the early 1900s.
That lady?
Yep. So it was the apparently the apparition of the Virgin Mary that appeared to these 3 children over like a period of time. And then what happened one day is when the children went to meet her, she said, bring all of your people to this field on this day. And so I think it was like 200 people ended up showing up to this field, and there was some people called it a technology that they experienced. Some people called it a religious experience that they experienced and things like that. But then, you have 200 people sitting there who all saw something, don't know each other from Tom or Jane or Adam or anything like that, have no reason. You cannot get 200 people to stage such an elaborate hoax and all of the stories sync up and be the freaking same. Okay. So that's what I mean. With anecdotal evidence, you have to look at that and be like, something most certainly occurred, or they most certainly saw something. Yes, we can't really, prove or, have evidence for what they saw, but you have 200 people who are dead serious that they witnessed some kind of event on this day, whatever it might have been. So I do take into account, I guess you could say, eyewitness accounts also. And what I kind of look at in those stories is I look at the similarities, right? I look at the similarities. Is there a lot of similarities in the appearances or the sightings and things like that? And if I look through all the accounts and there is a lot of similarities, with maybe some minute discrepancies, then I personally think they could be experiencing something.
Yeah. And nobody's going to, how did I put it before? The personal eyewitness account is some of the biggest testimony you can get in a court of law. But we have all these people out there seeing UFOs or Bigfoots or whatever, and it's been written off for years as crazy people, or even though there's probably at this point millions of cases of seeing all these things. So yeah, it is weird.
The government's probably researching it just like they were with aliens and extraterrestrials forever. And they just kept it, under wraps, redacted, not available to anybody, and then just criticized and made fun of everybody who had an alien story or a UFO story. And now they're coming out saying, oh yeah, UFOs are out there. That's every other day. I see an article in the news about that.
And it's the one thing I say about that too, ridicule, when somebody greets you with ridicule, it's because they have no counter argument. At that point, they have to discredit you because they do not have a reply or retort to what you're saying. One thing I really believe is that the global establishments try very hard and desperately to hide not only the true nature of reality itself, but our true nature as human beings. And I believe they do this for a number of reasons. The first being that they need the machine to operate well. And the machine is what keeps them in power. So if you have a whole bunch of enlightened human beings walking around who are like fully aware of like everything in their true nature, that's bad for the machine. You know what I mean? They're not going to want to participate in it, and they're not going to want to take part in their games and in their theater and all of that. I also think too that if we did discover the true nature of reality and our true nature of ourselves, the need for religions, governments, currency, all of that stuff as we know it today would dissolve. And that is something they're also concerned about, because that keeps them in power, that keeps them in their positions. And and the same thing with the mental gymnastics that a lot of these skeptics do and these scientists do when we talk about ancient civilizations. I mean, at this point, that's one thing I'm very passionate about. And at this point, we have so much irrefutable evidence, and they're like, oh no, that was from like 600 BC. And I'm like, no, dude, come on. I was like, come on, dude. Like, seriously, like, and it's like they try to do things like this. It's because, and that's one thing, I mean, I do agree with Graham Hancock on, is that there is a bias in that. There is. They want to keep the Darwinian narrative there, because the Darwinian narrative, at least in my opinion, what it does, as well as a lot of things, is it kind of decomposes moral structure. Because if you tell everybody that your life is pointless, you evolved from a monkey, you're on this blue rock floating through space in this abyss, you just came into being by chance, life has no meaning. I mean, what does that do to a human being? Like, what does that do to the psychology of the human being? And that it kind of starts to make you go like, well, shit, dude, if life has no meaning, then, blah, 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 I can do this and I can do that. And then it kind of causes like almost like this, what I would call a moral deterioration of the human being, because now you just made this person and all these people feel like their existence was just coincidence and life is totally pointless. It's just a whole bunch of gas and molecules that just so happen to 1 in a million chance just form into what it is today. And that will decompose moral structure. You know what I mean? That makes people more subservient to an establishment. That makes people more subservient to a scientific institution or things like that, and more subservient to a government. And I think honestly that door leads to totalitarianism. It does. And especially removing some kind of spiritual concept from the society.
Well, that's a great segue to go into, before we get out of here tonight, go into what you think of the technocracy and their place, at the reality of the world as you're kind of seeing it, and we've been talking about, where does things like that fit in, like the coming technocracy and all? Is that just more of the DLC pack just playing out, or is that actually going somewhere?
I think it is a little bit of the DLC pack playing out. I also think too that if there's one thing I've realized about this reality and the nature of it, so I kind of use the Truman Show allegory for it. Instead of being advertised products in our reality by the people around us, we're advertised narratives and trains of thought. And whatever narrative or train of thought that we accept as truth or fact, or as we accept as being real, becomes our reality, manifests into our reality. And whatever the collective believes on a whole, the collective consciousness here on the planet will manifest itself into reality and will become reality. And that's why I think what's happening is we're being pitched things right now. We're being pitched these narratives, we're being pitched these trains of thought, because essentially what they want is they do want to bring that into existence. But in order for them to do that, we have to accept it first. We have to go, okay, fine. Like, you know what I mean? They can't necessarily do it until the majority of the collective actually agrees with it and takes it as
it's like selling a script to a publishing company, or they're trying to sell it so that they can make that scene in the theater act out, and with all their little extras they have planted around. Makes sense.
Exactly. And so that's why I for instance, like this, all right, I actually used this in one of my Saturday shows. So Joe was talking about, if you see a nuclear bomb on the TV, right, like, yeah, you see a nuke going off on the TV and they tell you, now we know the media lies, and we know that a lot of things are doctored and a lot of things are scripted. So if you play non-attachment with that image and what they're trying to say, it's not going to manifest into your reality. Now, if you lock onto that image and you go, oh my God, I'm so afraid, like at that point, or I start to go into fear, then that's when you're accepting that. You're accepting that outcome. And, I think, like I said, we're going to start to really see, I think, throughout the years, how much consciousness truly does create reality. And that's why I honestly think, I even talked about this rabbit hole last night. I talk about how 8,000 years ago, right? Let's say like, the restart of human civilization. We've always listened to the select few, or the people we've deemed in an authority position for the truth about the greater things in life, such as reality, the nature of existence, science, things like that. Well, we have seen time and time again that these people can't be trusted. They constantly lie. They doctor information. So if consciousness creates reality, and we've been going to the select few for what we deem as like factual information on the bigger picture of things, is it possible we've manifested a false reality around ourselves? And that's actually a false reality inside of the real reality. And it's a huge rabbit hole when you think about it. It really is. You're like, holy crap. It very well could be. That's kind of what I'm getting at, is that they pitch these narratives and they pitch these trains of thoughts to people. And a lot of people, because they use emotion, it's a powerful thing that they use emotion. That's how they get people on board. They strike the emotional nerve. And, and then that's what usually causes a lot of people. I think they were trying to get people to buy into some kind of civil war with the Trump indictment. I think that was what there was an attempt at that. But I think a lot of people wised up and know that, he's not going to get charged. He's not going to go to jail. So thankfully it failed that time. And then they even tried pitching the fake alien invasion thing with the whole incident over Alaska, and they failed miserably at that too, because people are like, you did not shoot a UFO down. you did not. There's no way. Like, you know what I mean? So it's really, it's up to us, you guys. It's up to us. I guess really what I tell a lot of people is to use discernment in everything, even with things that you believe as a core belief, because you could be shown something that completely contradicts that core belief of yours. And
especially if you smoke a shitload of DMT.
Yes.
You might be showing some shit.
I highly recommend everybody does that at least once in their life. I do. I really do. I think the world would be a better place, honestly. And I'm sure you guys would, you would agree too. I mean, if everybody got to see what was that, the organic metaverse as opposed to the synthetic metaverse that, Mark Zuckerberg's trying to preach, I think they would be like, screw this synthetic metaverse. This is great. So I really think people should, but
I've always been a big proponent of everybody having a good mushroom trip once, but unfortunately it really is not for everybody, and some people would literally break. They couldn't handle it. So it's definitely not for everybody, but it would be in theory cool if everyone did that at least once.
Well, it was funny. There was a meme going around during COVID of a helicopter dumping out THC over the United States or something like that. And they were like, this is what the country needs right now. And I was like, I actually agree this time. So I agree with this time because, we're all a little bit riled up and things. But, I say use discernment. I always say do your own research. If you're interested in something and you want to know the truth, do it yourself, man. Don't just sit there and listen to what Neil deGrasse Tyson says or something like that. I know he's definitely controlled opposition, but he's like
controlled mainstream.
Yeah,
I don't even know what to call that guy. He drives me nuts.
He does. He drives me nuts.
We tell everybody that all the time. Come to your own conclusions on stuff. We're here to present ideas or maybe talk about things you hadn't thought of before. Come to your own fucking conclusion about it, and then everyone will get along. Oh, I did have one more thing. Do you know the Schumann resonance, the heartbeat of the earth or whatever? And then there's the solar activity that's apparently picked up like crazy. And this is just things I've seen on Facebook and shit. But apparently the solar radiation or the flares or whatever, the CMEs, whatever they're calling them, they're causing auroras down as far south as we are. And that's crazy. People are seeing them in Illinois and Indiana. And that's, I'm sure it's happened before, but that's
supposed to be down here. It was supposed to be up in Washington or Oregon.
Yeah.
And then it ended up all the way down here and in the Midwest.
We're like 12 hours south of Washington too. But so with all the solar activity, people were reporting really strange symptoms of just all kinds of different ailments and stuff, and it was all over the place. There were so many comments about it. And then I looked at the graph of the Schumann resonance and the graph of the solar flares, and they were in that exact time frame. Those two things were spiked like crazy when all these people were talking about weird effects and people being strange in general. Do you know anything about that, or about how like EMF or any of those kind of radiations would affect you?
Well, so I'm this is my thing about the sun. So I know a lot of people think he's a snake oil salesman, but the one thing that I do feel that Ben Davidson of Suspicious Observers has done is he's proven a lot of his claims with some pretty good evidence. And what I'll say to that is, as above, so below, as within, so without. So yes, what happens in the heavens and what happens on our planet here most certainly can interfere with states of health and with states of well-being, especially mental well-being. The reason being is because the magnetic field of the Earth is weakening. It is. It's moving. It's been dropping a whopping like 5-10% per decade at this point. And I do believe wholeheartedly what we are coming up on is what I call a disaster cycle on this planet. Now, I am keeping an open mind because I know very well that, we live in an interesting time and this kind of stuff could not happen. But the fact that this disaster cycle lines up with the half precession of the equinoxes here on this planet, it happens every 12,000 years. Every 12,000 years, like clockwork, this is supposed to happen, and we're supposed to be past due. And it lines up with a lot of Mayan astrology too, and it lines up with quite a bit of ancient philosophy. So that's what kind of intrigued me about it. So apparently what he says happens is that every 12,000 years, our galaxy goes through a magnetic reversal, which is happening right now. Our galaxy has gone through magnetic reversal. And then our sun goes through magnetic reversal. And then there's a galactic current sheet that hits the sun. And what this does is this causes the sun to kind of sneeze. And it causes something called a solar micronova. Think of something like, it's a little bit beyond a super flare. The sun kind of ejects its outer plasma shell. The star still remains, but it sends it into the solar system and sends it towards us. And a lot of people think that's what happened to Mars, why the atmosphere got stripped off of it. It could have been a nuclear war too. I mean, you get the same isotopes in the soil from these two incidences because you're looking at a very high heat event, you know what I mean, that generates very high amounts of heat and does things to, molecular structures of organic compounds that are very similar also to a nuclear bomb. But it would make sense as to the Younger Dryas incident that happened 12,000 years ago at the end of Atlantis, how the climate started acting crazy and there was all these disasters. Some people thought it was a comet impact, but the sun, I guess, according to Ben, is going to be reaching sunspot maximum in the year 2025. But what's kind of tricky about that is we're going into a grand solar minimum with that sunspot maximum. So the sun is going to start getting crazy, like the later half of this decade. Yes, it's going to start getting pretty crazy.
Sweet.
Yes. So
up to that.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like hit the kill switch. We're ready at this point, but it's like so I do think too, when you have interference in magnetic fields, humans have magnetic fields too. And of course, when you're having radiation, which is a form of a highly charged particle hitting the atmosphere that's going to interact with your magnetic field. And yes, it can do things to you. The one thing it does to me, it's funny. I've kind of like made a little chart. So if it's just 1 CME, it gives me energy. I have a hard time sleeping. I'm very awake. I'm like very talkative. Coronal hole streams give me brain fog. I've noticed like when we're having a coronal hole stream hit the planet Earth, I get brain fog. I feel like my head's in my ass all day long. That's pretty much what it is.
Let's get a lot of those because I feel like that all the time.
Dude, I'm telling you, man, it's been pretty heavy. And then when we get like really big ones or what they call like cannibal CMEs, I'm like just destroyed. I'm like lethargic. I'm not feeling too great. As far as my mental condition now, according to some of the stuff that Ben has talked about, like as the magnetic field weakens and the sun activity ramps up, people's mental states are going to deteriorate, because the nervous system is electrical impulses and all of that stuff as well. So he talks about how, like, when it's really about to start going down, you're going to notice like a lot of degeneracy, even more so, start to take over society in the world. Kind of makes you think of like Babylon a little bit almost. It's kind of weird, and
So that's what I wanted to ask you about. With this great awakening that's happening, how does that play into destruction cycles and at the same time mental degradation because of possible sun activity or earth activity? Like, how is this all just coming together as one nice happy clusterfuck? Because great awakening plus mental breakdown plus disaster cycles seems like a shitty time for an awakening.
I know, right? It's pretty interesting, so like I entertain and believe that theory is a possibility, because of all the ancient philosophy it matches up with, the ancient mythology, the processions, the Mayan calendars, things like that. It's a very believable theory. It is, because you can see all of the synchronicities in it that kind of line up. However, do I want it to happen? No. I mean, obviously I don't want that to happen. I think really what it is part of this great awakening is understanding kind of like the power we have too as a human being, and the power that how much, really how control we are of our destiny. You know what I mean? Really and truly, I don't think a lot of people even understand the depth and magnitude of that. When we have thoughts, we create different timelines, we create different possibilities. We're powerful beings, we really are. And I think what we could do is we could eventually maybe turn the tides, and even if it does end up happening, maybe establish like a better sense of community and a better sense of acceptance and compassion between all of us all, so we can band together for this or whatever it is. And I think that's also what the Great Awakening kind of comes into play. It does seem like a shitty time, but then it's funny because there's one thing I've learned, when you're on this path and you're on this journey, you get taught very hard freaking lessons, and you get taught them in ways that, will be very intense. And that's
what makes me think that the whole everyone coming together as a community thing might be after some hard knocks and maybe some hard lessons, and then it'll happen, because it doesn't look like anything else is just going to happen by itself unless people actually start figuring it out quick, because I don't see as much of that as I'd like to see.
I know I'm definitely on the positive end of things, but I definitely can resonate with you, Joe. I do agree that it would take something like that and I've even joked about that in my cynical moments. So I'm like, it really is going to take an asteroid for everybody to freaking kind of see what's going on and get the bigger picture of things. And I do believe that I do resonate with you on that approach too. I do think that if something like that did occur, people would ultimately all see that it's not just me or this person in the boat. We're all in this boat at this point. We're all in the same situation. And I think what that will do is that will break down the walls. It will, because now it's not like, I saw this meme. So it was these three people, and they were standing in poop, right? And then the one guy on the left was all like, standing in less poop than them. And then they're all yelling at him like, hey, he's standing in less poop than us. And then he looks at them and goes, why can't we talk about the fact we're all standing in poop? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what it's like. So, but at that point, everybody's going to be standing in the same amount of poop at that point. So it's like, at that point, there's going to be no division. So
well, there'll be no media blasting nonsense into people's ears, and there'll be no one for them to impress.
Exactly. And that's the thing too. They love to poke the bear, and that's really the sadness of it all, is because the people that a lot of Americans and a lot of people in the society have put in their trust in to deliver truth do not. And, they still are under the, guise and the mask that these people are delivering truth, a lot of them. And, It does, especially with, like, I mean, what did it? They released it for CNN, I guess, is funded by Boeing, DARPA, Skunk Works, Pfizer, Moderna. You know, and why would they
Big
lie?
shock.
Why would they lie? What do you mean? Why would they lie? If there was a conspiracy, it'd be all over the news. And like, I'm like, oh no, dude, and it's like, people, and I guess really the best way to put it, and I've talked about this before, is like, oh, it's almost as if this reality has some kind of spell on it. Almost like it's almost like it is. It's almost like, like it has some kind of spell. I've called it like the habitus. I've called it a few things. I even brought up a story. I got to know a Native American Cherokee elder. I used to teach sacred geometry and occult studies at a holistic center on the East Coast. And we ended up meeting this Cherokee elder. He did the eagle dance for us. Is pretty grateful because you don't get to see the eagle dance unless you're a Cherokee tribe member. And, I got to sit there and talk with him. And, we started talking about extraterrestrials, interdimensionals, things like that. And, he goes, man, I got to tell you this story, man, because you'll appreciate this, Steve. He goes like, so I have some property in Sedona, Arizona. And, I have a lake on my property. And I was like, and he goes, one night I was out there, just taking care of some stuff. And I heard this ungodly scream, he said. And he was like, I couldn't even tell what it was. It didn't even sound like an animal. And he goes, but, I was curious. So I hopped in my canoe and I started paddling out onto the lake. I'm like, you got balls, dude. That's great. And I'm, and he goes, and then all of a sudden, like, I find this, it looks like a gray alien, but it looks like a bodysuit of a gray alien. Like it shedded itself. Now mind you, dude, he's a Native American Cherokee elder. These people have so much integrity and honor. I believe him. I do.
And they've seen some of the craziest shit too.
Yeah. But he said he lugged the thing into the canoe, right? And he brought it back to the house because he's like, whoa, wait till everybody sees what I have, right? And then like he brings it inside and he goes, Steve, I was holding it up and I was showing them. And they did not want to admit what it was. This reality has some kind of spell on it. And I was like, you might be right, dude, because if you came into my house and showed me a gray alien bodysuit, I would believe you. I would, because it's right there, And I do think, there is some kind of, whether it's the, some people debate it's the 440 hertz frequency or the 60 cycle, the 60 hertz AC current we use and the EMFs that put off. Or things like that stifle, I guess, a certain perception of reality. There's a whole lot of theories. I really think what it is the habitus is just a very strong thing. And it itself is conscious. It's the habitus I would call the Smith in all of us, or the Smith and the people that
Agent Smith.
The Agent Smith and the people that So like the habitus itself is conscious itself. And it can manifest itself in people at certain times. And, that's what I think happens when, people experience something that is an astonishing otherworldly event. If you're not open-minded enough to receive what you're looking at, the habitus takes over and blocks it out. And I think it's a very big possibility.
Yeah, it's an auto filtration system, and we got way better at it. Especially after a lot of the old ways were forgotten, and all the myths and everything we had about strange creatures was just, oh, that's just myths. Don't worry about it. And then, you bring in all the frequencies and everything else, and everyone's super good at just blocking anything else out now. I mean, there's still stories today about fairies and other weird shit, but people they just write them off. Like, yeah, whatever. It's just weird Icelandic or Polish people or whoever's talking about that.
CNN. Whenever CNN's hosting that as their story of the week or the month, maybe it'll be for the year. Who knows?
It'll probably be 24 hours like fucking everything else. But Steve, thank you so much for coming on. Tell us where everybody can find you, and I guess that's it. Where they can find you, or your email. They want to pelt you with crazy emails because that happens.
So guys, first of all, Joe, Jen, I want to thank you so much for having me on. It's been truly a pleasure getting to know the both of you, getting to meet the both of you. Everybody, you can find me. I'm on Rumble. I'm on Forbidden Knowledge News Network with Joe and Jen here as well. If you want to hop on there, I'm also on Apple. I'm on Spreaker. I do have a YouTube channel that I'm going to start paying more attention to here eventually. I got kind of fed up that I got banned for a week for merely covering an article. I did not give medical advice. I did not say I was a doctor. I merely covered the article and got banned for a week. And that was kind of where I was like, I'm going over to Rumble. I was just like, but I'm gonna start paying my YouTube channel a little bit more attention. So I'm probably gonna do a lot more of my interviews there and do some more pre-recorded stuff for everybody there.
Fuck yeah.
Sweet.
Well, thank you. Thank everybody for listening. We will catch you on the next show. Have a good night.